elected office in your life? Okay, quite a few of you. So my first bit of advice, opposition research. What opposition research means is that if you're going to put yourself out there and run for office, the other side is going to try to dig up dirt on you. They're going to try to dig up dirt, and so make sure that you're voting, something as simple as voting. Make sure that you pay your taxes, that you have good credit. And on social media, watch what you post on social media, because that can be used against you. And later on, I'll give an example of how that was used, but I am very passionate about social change, and I believe that each and every one of you can be a change agent. So what I do for a living, I am an executive coach, so I teach executives how to be a better leader. I'm a professor, I'm working on my 3rd book, so I do a lot of different things. But most important, I enjoy life, and I really do a lot of public speaking because I want to be a change agent. Because each and every one of us in this room have the ability to be a change agent and change the world to what you want it to be. What that looks like for me, a world of more compassion, peace, love, and diversity. I think diversity is important. So with that, I'll pass it.
All right, hi guys. Joe Richardson, born and raised in what they call South Central LA. Learned politics going to a restaurant called Tell's Cafe with my dad, still there every morning, and he was a blue-collar businessman, body and fender guy. And we hear him yelling at the top of his lungs, saying names like Maxine Waters and Tom Bradley and Diane Watson, Yvonne Burke, Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, before I kind of knew what they meant. But before I knew it, in 4th or 5th grade, I was doing the same thing. I had a 6th grade teacher. How many of you had one teacher that changed your life? For me, it was my 6th grade teacher, Miss Bird, who I'm still in touch with. She's about 87 years old now. She told me that I had a gift for communicating with people. And after 6th grade, I was a published poet in high school. I was also a rap star a little bit before my time. But once I saw Matlock, I was hooked. I said, I want to be a lawyer, and I want to go into politics potentially. And so started doing student leadership and learned a valuable lesson in 8th grade when I ran for student body treasurer, where I was at a new school, it was my 2nd year at a new school, running against someone who had gone to elementary school with these folks. And it was a majority school, it wasn't a black school, it was Parkview Junior High in West LA. And I lost 3302 to 284, which was really quite a feat given that I had really come from nothing in terms of the number of people that I'd run against. And I learned a valuable lesson about bridge building. And because I've been in so many environments where I've been around a lot of folks that don't look like me. Now I love being around people that look like, Tripp. But, you're in a majority environment, you're at the University of Redlands. I was the 2nd black student body president there in 82 years. I'm a delegate for the 40th District for the Democratic Party. And now I'm running for city council in Redlands. Next year, I've already pulled papers. I'm running against a self-funded incumbent. And I would be actually the first black city councilman in city history, which is sick, but here's the thing. If you're really trying to do things, you might have to be first and you might have to be only. So don't feel bad about that. In terms of where I think politics is going, I think I would echo everything that she said. I think that your morality is very important. We're having a whole discussion now, it's all over the news about what people did years ago and how we ought to deal with them now because of what they did years ago. It would be great if they just hadn't done it years ago, right? I think your integrity is important. I'll be knocking on every door during my election, but I would be lying if I told you I wasn't running on 25 years of relationships. I started speaking at Rotary Club in Redlands every week when I was student body president in 1991. And so stay in touch. Don't let the fact that social media exists make you less personal. In other words, talk to people. Write a handwritten note thanking someone for meeting them. We all know that you can find them on LinkedIn and Facebook, but go above and beyond. Just about every job I've gotten and a lot of the things that I've done over the years have been because of relationship. And where I think politics is going, where I hope that it's going and the millennials take it, is to a place of more consistency. So for instance, first of all, I think there need to be good people on both sides of the aisle and in the middle. I'm not gonna put, it's tempting, but I'm not gonna put a label on someone that voted for Donald Trump, or someone that is considered moderate or conservative or liberal. We really have to get past that. And one of the things that I like about local government is they're nonpartisan races. So I'm Democrat, but that's incidental. I'm running in a Republican district. I got 1,000 more Republicans than Democrats in my district. So we're 4% black. Can I be the black candidate? No, right? But the world is changing, and that's okay. So be a relationship person, be okay with pushing the boundaries, but those boundaries should be pushing towards truth, towards the things that you're embracing in your life, towards the environment, towards the things that you know make sense. And if we do that and you guys lead the way, remember civil rights movement was a bunch of preachers in their 20s. And the establishment, which was white and black, did not like it. And my father-in-law actually worked with Martin Luther King, so he told me some stories. But trust yourselves and your instincts and where it takes you, because we not only want that, we actually really need it.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you both. My name is Todd Flora, and I am an elected member of the Santa Monica Rent Control Board. In Santa Monica, we are somewhat known for our progressive history, but we really weren't that progressive until the late 70s, when, much like today, real estate was going crazy. People couldn't afford to stay in their homes, and Santa Monica implemented a revolutionary rent control ordinance. Part of that ordinance that was voted in on April 10th, 1979, was to have a 5-member elected rent control board. We oversee and weigh in on disputes, landlord-tenant disputes. We do a lot regarding policy that affects tenants, including rents and the growth of rents. So I don't know if that was in your our pro-renter organization in Santa Monica called Santa Monicans for Renters' Rights, which is a very powerful membership organization. We're looking for people to run for Rent Control Board to replace a termed-out incumbent. Rent Control Board, by the way, is the only term-limited position in Santa Monica, and I think they wrote it that way in case a landlord's representative got on there, so they knew they couldn't be on the board forever. But and I raised my hand. I said, shoot, I'll run for Rent Control Board. And I was reelected in 2014. I'm also very involved in environmental organizations. You know, running for office and being elected, there are people that do it for a full-time job. LA City Council, our state legislators, members of Congress, our constitutional officers in Sacramento. And then there are folks like me who I meet literally once a month, maybe twice a month, and we have a long meeting on a Thursday night, you know. But there are other ways to get involved. Most cities have commissions you can apply for. They're issues specific. So if you're passionate about a particular issue, maybe get involved in a city commission, depending on where you end up landing and after you graduate and when you end up living. But I got my start basically getting involved in an environmental organization. It's called Heal the Bay. It's fairly well known in LA County, and it deals with water quality and clean beaches and oceans. And one of the ways you can really develop a policy expertise is to get involved in issues-based nonprofit advocacy organizations. And I would definitely recommend doing that as a volunteer, or maybe even as your job, as you're preparing to run for office, or maybe that you get all the soul food you need from the job you have. Maybe it's in advocacy or working to help folks that, you know, most average folks don't have a lobbyist, but a lot of people that work in nonprofit really are their voice. So I would certainly encourage you to do that. And in terms of millennial generation, I think any generation that increases voter turnout is definitely besting any of the generations that come before them. It's a real, I think, real scandal in this country that so many people that have the privilege of voting don't vote, and there's some of them that are almost too proud of it, you know. Well, my vote is that I don't vote. Well, okay, that sounds real great, but you know. You know, just encouraging participation, encouraging voting, and I definitely want to get to a couple of these questions that were on here in terms of what the future is going to look like, because both the current political climate and the way politics has changed in the last 15, 20, 30 years has a lot to do with something you don't ever hear much about, and it's redistricting. And it's why things are so hyper-partisan today. And I hope we revisit it, but I'll stop there so we can get on to the others.
Great. Well, I wanted to just mention too, I think housing is such a huge issue, especially for the millennial generation and everything. So I'm excited to hear what you have to talk about with everyone else on that too. For me, I'm from Long Beach. I'm actually a Long Beach State grad. If there's any,
Go Beach.
Yeah. I'm from. My name is James Almada. I currently work at Cal State Long Beach. I oversee a communications and marketing office. But my experience, I'm from Hacienda Heights, if there's anyone from the San Gabriel Valley. And I got involved because my parents talked about it at the dinner table a lot. They didn't really do politics, but my mom was a teacher and my dad was a shop steward for his union. And so they always had things that they were working on. And there was a few strikes over the early 90s, so I attended those with them, and that's kind of what got me interested in it. But my biggest lesson, and I think that got me kind of connected, was there was an ASB. I think I mentioned a few high school elections. An ASB election, and I was running a campaign for one of my good friends, and she was just that, a good friend. She wasn't necessarily a great leader. There was another friend of mine, it wasn't my best friend or anything, but she was a really strong leader. For some reason, I just backed the more charismatic person on the whole thing, and I ran that campaign, and we won. We won. Terrible president. Still a good friend. Just a terrible president. And I learned a big lesson, and I think I kind of kept that with me for the other jobs that I've had, and I'll talk about that in a second, which is just backing people who do great work, who want to do good things, and who do their research and do their homework. Sometimes they call them wonks. But that led me to kind of follow people like that in college. And once I graduated, and really back up good ideas and good leaders who have a strong heart and aren't doing it just for the charismatic portion of sometimes that politics draws people towards. So then I was a student body president at Long Beach State, and I went to DC, worked for a congressman for several years. Congressman Henry Waxman, he retired from Congress, and which is why I came back. And now I'm the Long Beach Young Democrats president. And we do a lot of great work with the state level for the California Young Dems, and that's kind of my influence currently. But I think you mentioned relationships, and I think everything that I've been able to do has been really looking at putting yourself out there and having coffee with folks. I think people like to mentor and like to help and give other advice. I think it's asking for that. I think sometimes our generation doesn't necessarily do that every time, or all the time we're hesitant to ask. But the worst that can happen is no. And the best that can happen is you build a new relationship. And that person can help hopefully keep you in mind, and especially if you leave a good impression. I think someone mentioned writing notes. It's the first advice I give to people when I talk to. Because no matter what, people don't, you get a text message sometimes, you get some emails, but a lot of people don't write a handwritten note to you to say thank you or send you that letter. Even if you do that for friends in a similar, colleagues in a similar age group, that's something unique, that's something different, you leave a lasting impression. So I'm excited to talk about some of the work that I've done, but I think relationships are huge, and just finding those people to connect with and putting yourself out there for that. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Thank you. Well, my name is Rob Carpenter, and I'm a millennial. So, I was born on the exact day and year Ferris Bueller took his day off. So, 1985.
That's great.
But I really love people. And one of my assignments in the earth is to heal broken hearts. And so I've always been attracted to things that allow me to help people. And so politics has always been a part of my DNA. I campaigned for President Obama, got appointed to the White House, was in the Political Affairs Division for a period of time, wrote briefs for him on what we call Big Bird. So Air Force One meeting named Big Bird. And so whenever the president would travel in Big Bird, we would have briefs for him wherever he went, around the country. I've lived all over the world and all around the United States, and one of the things that I've found is that people are really all the same everywhere, but we allow our artificial divisions to divide us, whether they be party, race, class, etc. And I think in our generation, our challenge is to mollify and to ameliorate, to reduce all of these artificial classifications that we have, and so that's what I've tried to do throughout my career. I was appointed Commissioner of Transportation for LA City when I was 23, the youngest commissioner in the history of the city, which was interesting. And when you're young and you're appointed or you're elected to things, people won't take you seriously. I walked into, and she's very familiar with these meetings, you walk in, you have to get the support of the city council. Quebec. I walked into the meeting, and the city councilwoman at the time, her name was Jan Perry, she said, "Where's the commissioner? Where's the new commissioner?" And I said, "I'm right here." And she said, "Oh, well, you're just the baby." And I remember thinking that, and I wasn't offended by it, but I just remember thinking to myself, okay, I can see that perception is going to create the reality of how people treat me. When I walked into my first city council meeting, the city attorney came up to me and said, "Oh, but you're the new baby-faced commissioner." And again, I realized that people wouldn't really take me seriously unless I did my homework. And that's the first thing I'd really recommend to everyone is read. I know it sounds basic, read, but don't read just the New York Times, the LA Times, or websites. Really get in there and read. Establish a daily reading schedule for yourself. I mean, I think since June I've probably read 30 to 40 books, and that's just in an hour or two of discipline every single day. Read. We need historical context. We need contextual context for things. For example, look at President Trump. So people say he's this and he's that. It should be true, but there's a big but. We've had people who are racist in the White House before. We've had people who are sexist in the White House before. We've had all of these labels, whether it be Trump in the White House or somebody else. We've had all of these things, and we've survived it. So we need to have some historical perspective on things. I think our generation is kind of has a little bit of amnesia, so to speak, about what's come before us. And so we need to have a better understanding of who we are, where we've come from, and that'll help us understand where we're going. And so that would probably be one of my biggest pieces of advice. And also the other thing too is think about how do you impact people's lives? How do you heal their hurts? How do you solve their problems? Remember, everything created was created to solve a problem. Eyes see, ears hear. Teachers impart knowledge. Mentors impart wisdom. All of you were born to change the world for somebody. That could be for your family, could be for your community, could be for this country, could be for the world. All of our assignments are different in the earth. But you have to recognize who am I assigned to? What group of people do I need to go out there and help and inspire? And how can I do that? Do I do it through commissions? Do I do it through elected positions? Do I do it through business? What do I do it through? For me, after I did my DC experience, did my time in politics, I decided I wanted to do it through media. And so I currently am the director of the USC Media Institute for Social Change. We won a couple of Emmys in putting out content, and we work very strongly in Hollywood in terms of trying to get the USC Media Institute for Social Change, trying to get primetime TV shows and blockbuster movies to have social change themes to create real behavioral change on the ground. And so we have to think about how do I want to engage the world given my own interests and given what the world needs right now. And so that's kind of where I'm at. And so I'll turn it back over to you so we can have a good conversation.
All right, I think you guys have set the platform. Will y'all put your hands together for this one? Alumni of Cal State Long Beach, my first political class was in our ethnic studies department, our black studies department, politics of the black community. A woman by the name of Dr. Piper Maggie opened up the class by saying this. It says, this class will be summed up by this: politics is a whorehouse, and it depends on what trick you will turn. And so in that context, I want to talk about, I guess, redistricting, and I want to talk about housing. How do we, in this political climate, and many of you, wherever you're working at, deal with the notion of rental going up in California? They say about 30% next couple of years. Right now, in what we used to call South Central, now South Los Angeles, a 2-bedroom is $2,000.
Great.
In Santa Monica, they'd say, "Wow, lucky you."
Lucky you. I know, because I used to live in Santa Monica, and I moved from Santa Monica getting relief, moving dead in the hood, thinking that I was doing well, only to know that I'm still paying $2,000 on 79th and Normandy.
Right. Yeah. Wow. I understand.
How do we engage that? How do we engage, talk about redistricting and having partisanship, and knowing that both parties knowing that they will forever, almost continually be able to win that district? How do we, as these conversations are coming up, how do we kind of level that to get back to somewhere in the middle? Because most of America they say is somewhere in the middle. So how do we engage that politically? Should those who are coming out of college have these kind of thoughts and processes in their mind as they're entering into a political environment?
Yeah, so I guess I'll just sort of jump in there, and I think that our generation is the most politically independent of any generation in history. We're seeing increasingly a number of people that have decided to declare their independence from Democrats or Republicans. They recognize that Democrats have a lot of great solutions, not all the solutions. They have to recognize Republicans have, some solutions, but I'm trying to be fair. But they're recognizing that the Democratic Party is not the panacea. It's not this great hope, and it's taken a lot of people for granted. Now, at the same time, it's produced a lot of amazing politicians, done a lot of great work. The Republican Party historically has done some great work as well, and if we're being honest about it. But I think that we have to recognize that this generation, which is the largest in American history, will one day be taking over. So you all will one day take over. Demographics is on our side, destiny is on our side. So recognize that you'll be in the decision-making seat very, very soon. The oldest of millennials, I'm not quite the oldest, but there are a few that are older than me. They're starting to get into real decision-making positions, and they're making decisions that are very different than previous generations might have made those type of decisions. And so I think first it's recognizing that we don't have to be beholden to one party or another. I think that oftentimes that creates chaos and it creates chains. And so we're putting ourselves in chains when we're saying that, well, I'm a Democrat, Trump is a Republican, and so therefore we can't work with them. And on any level, it could be a state level, it could be a local level, it could be whatever level that you're thinking of. So we have to liberate ourselves from these chains that we're in. And you can still be a strong Democrat or a strong progressive, or you can still be a Republican, but you have to say that this party may not represent all of me and may not have all of the solutions. Why? Because parties are made up of people, and people are inherently flawed. People inherently have things that are drawbacks for them. And so that's probably
But I think one of the challenges is we do live in a society where it really comes, especially at the federal level, there's two parties.
Yeah.
And so even with as successful as Bernie Sanders was, and he started off as an independent, but when he got time to run for president, he had to pick a side, and he picked Democratic side. So I think one of the challenges that millennials are going to have is really having their voice heard. And so the only way that you really have your voice heard in politics is getting involved. And it may be for the short term getting involved in the system that's here now and in an effort to change that system. But in smaller cities, as it was mentioned, Democrat or Republican doesn't matter, but once the higher up you go, it's pretty defined.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say, local elections, and this isn't meant to be discouraging. I was helping a buddy of mine that was running for LA City Council in the Valley, in the San Fernando Valley. And mind you, LA City Council is a nonpartisan member type, like a Mickey Cantor or a Peter Uberoff, a well-known Republican, but he headed up the 1984 Olympics, was commissioner of baseball, things like that. You can be as independent as you want to be, but it will matter depending on how far up you want to run for office.
I'd say that, just pushing back a little bit, I'd say that is a reality right now.
Right now,
but
yeah.
In terms of politics is always changing. These people are always changing. And we didn't always have the Republican Democratic Party. There are parties in Europe that have constantly changed, and coalitions that have been formed, and people weave in and out. If you look at the current president, nobody would have predicted that Donald J. Trump would be president of the United States 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago. Actually, I predicted it. I had a bet at USC, and because it being political affairs division, the White House, you recognize which polls to follow and which ones not to follow. And the ones that were accurate in 2012 were the Investors Business Daily poll and were the USC Dorn Select poll. And those polls said that Obama was going to win, whereas every other poll said that Romney was going to win. And those two polls in 2016 were the only two polls that had Trump up. Everyone else, and I said, I'm not going to trust these other polls that are wrong. Why would I do that? And so I think that when you look at politics, never say never. We have a reality business person who owned Miss Universe pageants as president of the United States. I think, and look at how he communicated. He was on Twitter, and that was his base. Whenever Hillary would travel somewhere, he would literally know where she was. He'd turn his plane around midair to have an impromptu event to go down there. I think politics is changing. I think we're the people that change it. We can have people that tell us this is what we have to pick, and this is what we have to choose. We have to choose one or the other. Or we can say, you know what, we can make up our own minds and we can figure out what we want to do. You know, we're going to be living through the rest of this century, and it's up to us to decide, not other people who impose on us their thoughts from the past. And so I would just say that it's harder, and you will be a renegade, but this is the Dr. King philosophy. This is the philosophy of civil rights. This is the philosophy of women's rights, where we said, you know what, we're going to eschew the labels and eschew other people telling us what we have to do, how we have to think, what sides we have to choose, even though it might be politically palatable in the short term. And I'm somebody who's been in the White House. I'm somebody who's worked with all sorts of politicians. I understand it. It's not a popular message that I'm putting out there. At the same time, it's a message from my heart saying that, you know because we are so partisan in DC, after healthcare was passed, nothing happened. Zero happened. Nothing has happened this year in Washington. Zero has happened because of the old school thinking. We have to move beyond that thinking.
Can I say this, because I think this is what I love about the panel is that we have the real divide that is happening with millennials and those and us who are previous before millennials, right? And how will they be able to function in a system that is grounded in a two-party system and yet has the way of thinking out of the box like you're talking? Are we at a place right now that our democratic system, our democracy, is really might be at a collusion now? Because we have different, millennials have a different mindset than what we're talking about.
You mean collision? Not collusion.
I mean, excuse me.
Collusion is another thing going on. But you meant a collision, right?
Collision.
Right.
Yeah. Collusion is what I hear on MSNBC. Excuse me. It happens when you listen to one station all the time.
Well, things are changing, and I tend to agree with the notion that the two-party system, as it stands, is going to have to change in some ways, even if they continue to exist as they do. Because here's what's happened. If you look in every area of society, I'll give you a perfect example. I wanted to be an entertainment lawyer for a long time, and I've done some entertainment stuff. And back then, we knew what the major distributors were. This is how you get your record sold. This is how you get it into the store. There's no store now. I've got a lot of people that I know that do internet commerce, and everything is being delivered differently, cutting out the middleman. The gatekeepers, and I think that the two-party system is a gatekeeper. And I spent some time in London in July and had some discussions with some business people and some things like that. And Donald Trump won by what amounts, I mean, we know he was behind on the regular vote, but when you put the bunches of the states that make the difference, it's about a football stadium. Okay, that's about how much he won by. If you, as a millennial group, get 3 million people together, you actually have the potential to change an election. We've had discussions, these theoretical discussions, about what party Martin Luther King would have been or would have belonged to. Well, it's because you never knew then. That was the point. It was really about the issue. So I absolutely believe that, particularly, frankly, I like to tell my congressman, Pete Aguilar was my guy all the time, there's no romance without finance, Pete. I know you gotta go fundraise. And I'm learning that right now. That's why I pull papers, and my election is a year from now, because I'm running against a self-funded incumbent that wrote himself a $30,000 check last time. But if you come with the resources, and there's 3 million of us, and all of us give $20, I'm just doing, or whatever else, and I'm oversimplifying it, but what I'm telling you is, you guys do technology and communication and social media naturally. We all had to learn it. I had a word processor in college. I didn't have a computer. My first computer was in law school. As a matter of fact, it was the second year of law school. I used to handwrite my assignments and then go to my friend's apartment and write the thing up. It's an acquired taste for us. It's totally natural for you. So the Donald Trumps of the world, bless his heart, and the Bill Clintons of the world, cannot tell you what you can and can't do. They literally can't, because they don't No, they don't understand. That is real. If you get that and you see it, here's what I foresee. What I foresee is more consistency, where, for instance, if someone really believes, I think that the Republican of the future will actually say, whether you agree with it or not, that they'll actually say, I want the government to stay out of my guns. And they'll also say, because I want the government out of personal decisions, I want the government out of my wife's body too. See, that's consistent, regardless of whether you agree with it or not. Why does government get to weigh in on this thing, but not on this thing? I think that one of the things that you can bring is a consistency to say, if I think government ought to have their hands out of something, or I make a difference, I make some type of litmus test that says, this is why I think government ought to do this. This is why I think government ought to do that. And here's the other thing, and this is the temptation that I want you all to resist. My congressman won, he could not have won running as a liberal Democrat. Before 4 years ago, when Mark Takano in Riverside blew it up, in Riverside and San Bernardino County, there was one Democrat elected in either of those counties, one Democratic seat since the Vietnam War. There's one. It was George Brown, which was taken over by Joe Baca. Now, all of that's changing now, but the first time my congressman ran, he came in third because there were 4 Democrats in the race, and it was a plurality Democratic district, and the 2 Republicans came in front. But even the guy that won didn't run the next time, and he almost didn't make it the second time because the same thing happened. He was a bridge builder from the beginning. He got appointed to city council when he was 26, and he worked at a bank. He did government related to the bank. Resist the temptation. We categorize because we feel safe. It makes us feel safe. You want to look at somebody and know if they're your friend or they're your foe. That's totally natural, and it's part of your enlightened self-interest. What we've done now, though, politically, though, is now because people go off way to the right, we're going to react by doing what? Going off way to the left, right? Way to the left. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, most of us are right in here. Most of us are still in here. The ones that are screaming the loudest are still there. Like, for instance, right now there's getting ready to be a race. Kevin De Leon's running against Dianne Feinstein. And if you want to have an argument about new versus old, do that. But as it pertains to effectiveness, I think Dianne Feinstein has been very effective. I really do.
So I want to emphasize a point that you made to the millennials is really use the power of social media, that platform, to affect change. And since I started off saying I'm half Native American, and for our Native Americans, social media really got out our biggest message around Standing Rock. Standing Rock was something that the mainstream media did not pick up. It was something that went viral worldwide, and it was forced to take a look at that. So you have the power of social media on your side, which comes natural to you. However, I do want to caution you is that, technology is great, but don't lose your communication skills.
Absolutely.
And I think we touched upon this earlier. Communication is so important. For those of you that do want to run for political office, join the debate team. If you're working, go out there and join Toastmasters. Develop those public speaking skills that will enhance the social media. It's not one or the other. You really need both. But use the platform of social media that you have to affect that social change, whatever it is that you believe in.
I talk about the law a lot, I'll say quickly, when I'm speaking on college campuses about Facebook and having discretion and those types of things. When people look at you, let's say you're non-religious. It's fine if you're non-religious, but I still want you to be moral. By that I mean, don't do just anything just because it's done. I just had this big discussion with my daughter about her retweeting something on Instagram or Twitter that she thought was funny, but it's something that she wouldn't say. But let's not even go to the fact that your dad's running for city council. Let's not even go there, okay? But you are a black female, okay, growing up in Redlands, and you're doing good, and I can make a call for you, and all of these other things, but you're still a black female growing up in Redlands. And how you are perceived is very, very important. So even if you're not religious, you have to be morally centered. Like right now, we're supposed to have this big discussion about morality because of what's happening down in Alabama and everything else. And bless his heart, we got a president that has no authority to speak on it. You got to make sure that that's not you. And by the way, let's say you're not even talking about politics. Let's say you're talking about getting a job. How many people know somebody right now that you would have a beer with, but you wouldn't hire at school? I mean, let's keep it real, right? A lot of the things that you end up doing that lead to opportunities, whatever they might be, are because they're going to be because of the decisions that you make at this age. So just be aware of that and be really careful about it.
James, I want to bring in and talking about student government. I'm a product of working with those in clubs and then doing student government. And I want to talk about how that works to kind of give you, if you can really getting people's feet wet, but also helping them to understand the bitter taste of politics, the losing,
Sure.
the games that are played. I can say it now. I remember tearing down people's posters and tearing up their signs. You know, just the games that have to happen that happen in politics. Can you?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think student government's a microcosm of practicing some of the things you're going to end up learning more in the real world. For me, I ran for student government, of course, a couple times. Was a senator, and then I was a student body president. But I also ran a couple campaigns for different teams in college, and I think what you saw there sometimes was some nasty stuff from that piece. But I think some of the positive stuff because I actually ran during social media when it was there. So you know, I used that. I think leveraging social media for community building. I think that's kind of what you were talking about. You do learn how to do some of those skills earlier on. If you leverage it not to just say things, but to bring people together. That was something that we used in 2010. And I think that campaigns nationally were using around the same time to kind of bring people to talk about certain conversations at the time. Of course, tuition is still an issue. But you're always ramping against these big issues and or fighting against these big issues. And just like in the real world, it takes a lot of time. And institutions can be really slow. Institutions like Congress can be really slow. But institutions like your universities can also. So it's a training ground where you actually get to see that happen and what techniques it can be you can use to actually overcome a plus or minus grading system or to overcome other things on campus, because that so much relates to what's going on at the state level. And I do want to actually talk a little bit more about housing just for a second. I know
We didn't even get there.
we didn't get there, but I think we were talking about, I think I want to hear from you too. On the social media front, which I was thinking again, bringing people together. Right now, there's Housing Long Beach, which is the organization I'm sure you're familiar with a little bit. They're working on rent control in Long Beach, and because we don't have any rent control ordinances. And one of the things that they're trying to do is bring people to different conversations. My club itself had them come in and invited community members, whatever party you were, and that way people can actually hear about how does Long Beach compare to Santa Monica, compare to LA, and what are different things that are happening. And what I saw that was great is they leverage sure things that I learned, and we leverage our social media, our different accounts to bring people together to have a conversation about how does this affect our generation. And it affects us, I think, the most. Because renting is just going to be eating away at your income whenever that first job, second job is. And that's not something that doesn't allow you to build any wealth, right? And we know that that's a problem. So I'm excited to kind of hear a little bit about what you got to say from the efforts that it took to kind of get the council together and elect a council for different housing ordinances. But I don't know how you guys did that. But.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it was 1979 was when the original rent control ordinance passed in Santa Monica. I was 8, and I didn't live there. I remember I was still stuck in very Republican Berea, but the elections in Santa Monica, one of the first things we did to better increase voter turnout and voter involvement is something that Los Angeles voters decided to do, and that is we moved our elections to the even numbered year. So every time there's a governor's race or a presidential race, in even numbered years, Santa Monicans are voting for city council, rent board, school board, college board. Before I get on to housing, though, I just want to say something coming off of this communications thing. I mean, we could talk generational stuff all day, and I'm not an expert on generations. I'll tell you what I do know. No matter what generation and no matter how things change, if you take anything from at least what I have to say today, and I don't think I'd get much disagreement, no matter what, whether you're an advocate for a nonprofit, an advocate for a particular piece of legislation, you have to have a message, and it has to be communicated effectively. Paul Tsongas is a name you probably don't remember. You were babies if you were even born. Ran for president in 1992 in the Democratic primaries. He was a one-term senator from Massachusetts that got cancer, and so he didn't run for re-election. He'd been out of politics for years. He ran for president on the message that Democrats can be people that fight the national debt too. Democrats can be people that are for economic development too. And we all know who won that Democratic primary. It was Bill Clinton. But Paul Tsongas, who had a speech impediment and who was a one-term Massachusetts senator, was one of the last 3 people standing because he had a message. Okay? You have a message, it can help you overcome certain other barriers. And that's why I think a lot of what Rob is saying does have merit. I mean, I hate the top 2 primary system. We should never have it. Basically, can I tell you how it got created? It was basically to get a single vote for the state budget, and they kowtowed to a moderate Republican, probably the last moderate Republican in California, who said, I want a 2-party system, put it on the ballot, or a top 2 primary system, put it on the ballot, and I'll vote for the budget. And it turns out the voters passed it as well. But hopefully that will change and we'll get rid of it. But you have to have a message. If you're running on just your good looks and charm, that may get you elected in college, but you got to have a message. Okay, so housing. No, but listen, student council in college wasn't that much different than high school. At least I went to a small school. I went to the University of Richmond. I went to the University of Richmond in Richmond, Virginia. Go Spiders. We were 3,000 students. No Spiders, that's right. And I don't know how I got elected with my looks, but I at least had some charm. But I also had a message, and a lot of people just ran putting up signs. I actually did handouts and said what I was for, and that's how, among 40 candidates, because apparently everybody ran for the student senate when they're freshmen, and it kind of whittles down as you become a 2nd year, 3rd year, and 4th year. But that's how I stood out among 40 people, is I actually had a message, and But
I jump in there and agree with you on that one. And this is something that plagues, I think, a lot of politicians and people in general. Your message is more important than you as the messenger. Your message is more important than you as the messenger. As if you remember Bane from Dark Knight Rises, he said, it doesn't matter who I am, all that matters is my plan. And your message is more important than you as the messenger.
Yeah, no, I agree. Look, there's a guy that looks like a mad scientist that almost won the Democratic nomination last year because he had a message. Now, I didn't end up voting for him in the primaries, sorry, but the man was for, Bernie Sanders is for things. And he gathered millions of people to support him because he had a message, okay? I mean, the guy doesn't look like he combs his hair, but he knows what to say when it comes to getting people excited about cheaper tuition or no tuition, taking care of our elderly. I mean, you name it, the man has a message. Housing. There are 2 Californias, and I think other students of California politics on the panel would agree. The 2 Californias nowadays in Sacramento aren't northern and southern. They're inland and coastal. Coastal liberals love their property values and do not build enough housing. Santa Monica, we have debates about just about every development that is proposed in the city. People say it's impossible to build in Santa Monica. I'm one of those people who's kind of a slow growther. I'm glad it's difficult to build in Santa Monica, but when you're talking about building housing, especially if there can be a decent affordable ratio of housing, I don't think there should be that much of a debate. Now, having said that, Santa Monica's 90,000 people, we're 8 square miles. Unless we continue to build up and up and up, we're never going to be able to, and maybe other cities as well, we're never going to be able to build our way to affordability in Santa Monica. Regionally, however, we're like, what is it? Is it 100,000 or 500,000 units below what we need to be? 500,000 to even lower, to both house the people we need to and at literally rates they can afford. By the way, you know who made up? Have you ever heard, like, you should spend 30% of your salary on housing?
Yeah.
You know who made that up, that ratio? The housing industry. And by the way, most people are spending about 40 or 50% now. It's insane. So you have to get in there and you have to fight NIMBYism, not in my backyard. And the fact is, unless you want to start moving further and further out and have, you know, an area code with a 9, which is fine, lovely areas, you're going to have to build more houses. Yeah.
We had a different issue.
I'm just saying it's far away. I love Redlands.
Well,
It's
it's
far away.
interesting. You know, I grew up in South Central, and every now and then I look up my house that I grew up in, and it's a 1,200 square foot house that was built in the 40s, and it's worth as much as my 2,300 square foot house in Redlands. But I'm not moving to LA. I love all y'all, but I've done it, and everything that's good about it, I can come get it, and then I can go right back east. Now, that being said, we have a different issue, and here's what it is: homelessness. And there's a relation there. In inland Southern California, Redlands is known as the jewel of the Inland Empire. So if you're going to be homeless, would you rather be homeless in San Bernardino, or would you rather be homeless in Redlands? You'd rather be homeless in Redlands. And so one of the issues that we have to deal with, and which is one of my issues I'm dealing with, that I would deal with and make part of my campaign, is doing something comprehensive for homelessness. Now, it is a very complicated problem, because if it wasn't, somebody would have put a patent on the solution, done it, packaged it up, and sold it, and everything would have been lovely. I sit on a board for a place called Redlands Family Services that helps folks that are homeless. And the first thing we do, we're a housing model first. In other words, the first thing we have to do is get your housing stable. Then we deal with jobs. Then we deal with education. Then we deal with all these other things. But it's an open question of what we actually do given the different elements. First of all, we've got people that come to our area because it's a nicer area. Second of all, you're dealing with less resources coming from the top. Third, you have to, and maybe first, you have to separate, for lack of a better term, the wheat from the chaff in terms of folks that are homeless because they have drug problems, because they have mental problems, or they're the working poor. You know, it's a very complicated problem, and it's not easy. And again, even though we don't cost what things cost in LA, obviously we cost too much for plenty of folks. And so that's a big thing that we have to deal with, and it has to be sold in terms of the solution, not as a bleeding heart thing. Redlands is not liberal. Okay, we've moved along, but most people that are moving along, you know, the people that say, "Oh, I'm not racist," or whatever it is they are, they're not as progressive as they say they are, or as they think they are. You know, but we have to sell this solution, whatever it is that we decide to do, and get all stakeholders together as something that is actually pro-business. Am I more likely to come to your business if there's not somebody laying in front of it? If I feel more safe, am I more likely to shop downtown? So it's a comprehensive problem, and it actually has to incorporate state, local, and national levels. On the state level, Prop 57, Prop 47 means more people could potentially be on the street because they're not in jail. And should they be in jail for things that maybe should be misdemeanors? No, probably not. But we still have to deal with employability and a lot of these other things. So it's a complicated problem.
Can I go here? Because I only have 10 minutes. I want to get some questions from these wonderful people. But I think there's I see you 1 and 2. I'm coming around the mountain. But I want to throw this to Cynthia, because I think we've talked about housing. We've talked about, what else we talked about?
Generational change.
Generational change. We haven't talked about sexual harassment. Both parties have rocked on, politically, both parties right now are rocking, industries are rocking about this notion of sexual harassment and how we are engaging with different genders and what is appropriate and not appropriate, what is appropriate. Can you kind of talk about that as being
So I am so happy that this conversation has started. The whole #MeToo on Facebook, in a 24-hour period, 12 million posts. That means 12 million men and women have said they were sexually harassed. So to me, the way you change things is starting the discussion and really calling out people on their crap. And I think we've started it, And it has to continue because it's a systemic problem in our society and, for the most part, the world. And until we start having those discussions, and until we start having more women elected to office, because women leaders bring a different skill set. You know, we bring compassion, we bring empathy, we bring a different skill set, which is a good thing that I believe that society needs. I do a lot of public speaking about women empowerment, and what I tell the guys is that I'm pro-women, but that doesn't make me anti-men. I believe that it's about, you know, as my Native American side, it's about harmony and balance. And how do we balance that? And as long as women are oppressed, we're out of balance. So I'm so happy that we've started this conversation in the entertainment industry, in the, you know, in pretty much all areas of society. And my third book that I'm writing is actually an empowerment book called Yo Tambien, and I'm bringing 10 women that have been sexually harassed. And I'm just going to put it out there. When I was 17, I was raped, so I actually know this firsthand. And I'm doing it from a place of hope and healing, not to recount what happened, because that puts you in the victim mode. It's about how do we heal after we've, you know, experienced this. So I'm excited that this conversation is there and that we've ripped off the Band-Aid. And now the healing can begin as we move forward as a society. So thank you as a man bringing up this conversation. And in politics, because, you know, we look at all the politicians that are being accused of sexual harassment as well. And it's up to us as women to not only have this conversation, help each other heal, but help each other. Because when one rises, we all rise.
Yeah.
And I would
Hold
just
on.
add
Can-
to that.
Can I just ask this one question with you? Do we believe that this issue, which we know is systemic, is being politicized? Will it be sucked up in? I'm scared that it's going to be sucked up in the politics of more, the politics that is going on of not liking one and party stuff, and we really smother and not see that this is something that is going on in all different industries.
I would just say that, just first to add to what she said, as men as well, we need to stand with our sisters. When they say these things. It's extremely important. But I would say that, I would probably say, because the conversation happened culturally as opposed to politically, it started culturally. It started with Harvey Weinstein, it started with Hollywood, it started with the purveyors of society in terms of what we think, believe, those conversations. Because of that very reason, I think it transcends and supersedes politics, fortunately.
Yeah.
But had it happened the other way around, I think, now the issue will still be politicized, but I think that it has greater longevity and greater depth and breadth because it happened on a cultural basis first.
Okay. I seen your hand.